So while I was deployed with a combat operational stress control unit where we did prevention work, trying to keep folks healthy while they were downrange so they didn't have issues when they got back home.
So you dealt with stress, not so much PTSD because it was before they came home, but trying to prevent PTSD.
Correct. Trying to help them reintegrate successfully when they got back home. We had prevention teams that taught classes. We also had treatment facilities. So for those folks who had been in combat, had perhaps seen people killed or killed people themselves, we had treatment available for them too.
Now let me ask you about the incident that brought us together. You called and said you wanted to talk about this because we had the incident on the bridge where the car overturned and the driver from Bolivia, North Carolina, jumped off the bridge. 37-year-old Sean Lawver. Now his parents have talked to a TV station in Myrtle Beach and have said that he suffered PTSD. He had served 20 years in the Army and was a helicopter technician, served in Iraq and Afghanistan, and did suffer PTSD. Well, in their words, it was the PTSD that jumped off the bridge, not their son. What do you think? Was it the overturned vehicle that may have set off the PTSD, or what could have triggered that to result in the bridge jump?
It most certainly could have been, and I think it might have been. Now, this is just my opinion and going off of the news stories that I have read and seen already. That most definitely was a triggering event to be in an auto accident. The news report says that he told a bystander that he was not going back to jail. That's a triggering event, something he had no control over. So in that split second, that veteran decided he was better off jumping off that bridge than facing what awaited him.
So if that's the case, and we'll never know 100% for sure, but if that is the reason, because he was worried about jail, it was PTSD from jail, not military service, that might have triggered this one.
I think it's a combination, honestly. You don't serve, in my experience, you don't serve multiple deployments in Afghanistan and Iraq and come home without symptoms of PTSD. So I think it's a combination. I think it was the PTSD. I don't know for sure. I have read accounts that he was driving under the influence. We know that veterans with PTSD often self-medicate using alcohol or illicit drugs. I can't say for certain that is what he was doing, but by all accounts, he was driving under the influence.
But in general, not just this particular case, but in general, how big of a problem is it in Georgetown County?
In general, I think it's a very huge problem. And one of the reasons it's so big is stigma, and we don't want to talk about it. The other issue is, in Georgetown County, we don't have any veteran-specific treatment places, right? We have to go to Myrtle Beach or Charleston. That's another issue. So
now, PTSD, what can trigger it? I mean, I know not everybody's going to overturn their vehicles, but we hear sometimes, 4th of July fireworks can do it. Different things. What triggers it mostly?
Fireworks are huge. But his father even mentioned, veterans sometimes hearing someone blow the horn can startle them. Veterans, when they initially come back off a deployment, have a difficult time driving their car because almost everything triggers them because of how the enemy does IEDs and those other things overseas. It can be reading about someone who took their life or who died as a result of symptoms from PTSD. Any number of things can trigger someone. and can trigger those symptoms.
So can someone have PTSD and not know it because they don't have the reactions to the fireworks or to the other things that some people may, but they could still have it?
Most definitely. And in fact, those are the people perhaps we should look out for a little more, because we don't readily recognize it. But because it is a combination of issues, and they come and they go, it is sometimes hard to identify. And it's probably more difficult to identify in male veterans than female veterans. Can I expound on that?
Yeah, tell me, why would that be?
The reason for that is women veterans are more likely to seek help. Women veterans have a tendency to look inward, take inventory, say, hey, something's not quite right with me. I think I need to reach out to someone. Versus men, I found this very interesting. Men quite often with PTSD will be depressed. And one of the ways they work through that depression, or the outward sign of that depression, is anger, which we don't often equate depression and anger. But in men, it happens more often like that. So
now, somebody who has a reaction, what is the biggest thing that happens in a reaction to PTSD?
I think the biggest reaction is that feeling of hopelessness and being out of control. So we talk in general, for years we said 22 a day. That was the number that got thrown around of veterans. It is honestly 20 a day. So the suicide rate has dropped a little. But shockingly, it is the second cause of death in veterans under the age of 45.
Wow.
And the other high-risk group is our Vietnam veterans, Aaron.
Do veterans who didn't see, military action, weren't in the middle of, battle, do they suffer PTSD?
Yes, yes. I've seen it. I've seen it during my deployment. I've seen it since I've been home. Most definitely, yes. Because think about it. You're picking up, packing up, going away for at least a year, probably. So the stressors of being away from your family, maybe not being able to communicate with your family, living in austere conditions, many things, hearing things blow up around you, even though you personally aren't in combat. Most definitely. Yeah.
How can people get help? You said we don't have a center here in Georgetown. I mean, is Myrtle Beach Charleston the only, and is that going to change anytime? Will we ever have anywhere in Georgetown?
There is talk that Georgetown is going to get a VA clinic. It's talk. But any veteran can go to their local emergency room
Oh, okay.
and tell them they are in distress. Contact the VA. I would say if it's a veteran who it's not an emergency situation, they should reach out to the vet center. It is different than the VA, and I can give you that information. The vet center in Myrtle Beach would be a great place, non-judgmental place to start to get help.
So there is somewhere on the Grand Strand that they can do it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Besides the VA center?
Yes. And there are many resources online. The VFW works with something called Give an Hour. These are psychiatrists, therapists who donate their time to treat active duty and veterans. And they have a link online. A Military One Source is another great place veterans can contact, get free counseling. So even though we are kind of removed, there are still resources.
What else do you want people to know?
Get help. Get help. Like, and I don't, you can do whatever you want with this. I had PTSD really bad when I came back. Let's see. So, that was 20 years ago, 18 years ago. And it probably took me working really hard at it for about 7 years to get to the point where I could finally help other veterans.
Now, did you have things that triggered you, or?
Well, by virtue of what I did, so a lot of what happened to me was secondary trauma because I listened to people's stories who witnessed horrific things.
But you still do that.
I still do that, but I found what works for me. And what I want veterans to know too is it doesn't have to be going for an hour and sitting in a therapist's office. The VA now finally offers alternative options like massage therapy, acupuncture, group therapy, single therapy. Sure, there's still therapy, but there's other options. And so, you know, they can come by here, for goodness sake, and talk to anybody. It doesn't have to be me, because we have a lot of veterans with PTSD here.
So how can people contact you or the VFW here?
I'm more than, well, the email address, vfwpost6444@gmail. I'll give my personal phone number. Can I do that?
Yeah.
502-297-1103. Yeah.
Anything
Just,
else?
they're not alone. Not alone. And the family's hope, and my hope, and the commander's hope here too, I will say, is that this tragedy can help prevent even one veteran from dying by suicide. And I know I kind of hit the suicide heavy, but unfortunately, you know, it's the second leading cause of death in veterans under 45. So it is something we need to talk about. Yeah, get help. You're not alone. I can't say it enough.